Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Leaf Collective. I'm banging on my table and then everything is vibrating, but I'm in the office today rather than in my home office, which is where I usually record. So today with us is Nikos and Panos, who are joining us from Greece. They're both co-founders of a little mighty app called Pandectes, and we're going to be exploring what it does. It has become our go-to app for us here at Leaf. And we thought this could be a great opportunity to amplify the great stuff that they're doing, but also to kind of like discuss all things privacy compliance. For a lot of people, cookie compliance or privacy compliant is just a thing that you have to put on your website. For many, it's just a checkbox that you do on your Shopify setup. More often time than not, it's a lot more complex than that. And actually, it's not as easy as just clicking a checkbox on your Shopify, because even the Shopify default one ain't compliant. At least we have not been able to make it compliant out of the box. So you actually need to go with solutions that actually are specialized for this. And we have found Pandectes to be one of the best, if not the best, out there for Shopify implementation. So I'm really excited to be talking to both Panos and Nikos today, and learn a little bit more about how this little mighty app and this little mighty team are doing amazing stuff for tens of thousands of stores out there. So welcome, guys. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for your invitation, Gilbert.
So for arguments of this conversation, I mean, both Nico and Panos are technically have a technical background, although in the day-to-day operation of Pandectes, they split their responsibilities a little bit. Nico's being the business guy and Panos the techie guy, I guess, for lack of a better word. But yeah, we were talking off camera a little bit about the story behind Pandectes, and I think it would be great to, before we deep dive into compliance, why it's important, and also the journey behind it. Like, where does Pandectes start? Like, why compliance out of all things?
Great. Thank you for the intro, and thank you for inviting us to this podcast. So we started back in 2018 with a simple idea of creating a simple banner for covering GDPR back then. So it was very simple, and we started with a very small number of stores in the beginning, but it was becoming a lot popular after some years. So we started working more on that, and now we are in a position that maybe we are the number one GDPR application on the App Store with more than 37,000 live stores and more than 143,000 total installs.
Yeah, no, that is great. Did you guys launch on the App Store right from day zero? Was that like you guys started there?
So the first version was launched in 2018. Yes.
And then, how has been that journey from brand acquisition, from requirements, from keeping up to date with? Because obviously, I feel like with anything, and especially anything coming from the EU, it kind of starts with somebody having an idea about it. Obviously, privacy is something that is important. We've seen what the lack of privacy can actually end up with. But so, it's a very important thing, but also it's a very cumbersome thing, especially because on the consumer side, especially for a lot of people, accepting cookies is it's an annoying thing, right? I mean, and there are even tools that will automatically accept cookies or whatever, right? So that you don't have to be looking at it all the time. How do you navigate from being just an informational thing and an informal, quote unquote thing of, hey, we use cookies, all the way to today where, like it's almost like playing whack-a-mole in terms of laws, in terms of changes, countries, ideas, how that journey came about?
So when we started, the idea to do this kind of application, privacy thing, was actually done just because we thought it would be easy. It's just a banner, so you have to create a banner. We never imagined, first of all, that the journey would go the way it did, and we would never imagined the complexity that exists behind this little mighty app, as you said, Gilbert. So the difficult thing was that in order to make it succeed, we had to first make people aware of the thing. Because, as you said, the consent application, the cookie consent banner, is kind of it's not, as somebody told me some time ago, it's not a vitamin app. It's a painkiller app. It's somebody that it's an application that somebody would like to avoid having, but you must do that in order to save your company from fines, okay, for violating the privacy. Now, I think that the way it evolved, it had to do, and the ideas that we had around how to make that better or how to deal with more regulations, it was 50% coming from things that we were getting from the support and the feedback that we were getting from our customers. So, a lot of people had ideas, so they had requirements about their countries. So, for example, we do the law in Brazil. Before having several Brazilian stores, we were not in the space of the LGBT law. Um, um, and another part, of course, that we knew that the GDPR in Europe was becoming a big thing. It launched in 2018. So, although we started with a very simple, we had a vision that it evolved something more complex. Okay, and that's how we have formed the requirements or the things, the features that have now formed what the application is.
And of
and
course,
and it's
the
interesting.
today picture is that apart from what Panagiotis said about something that is very important in order to avoid fines or something else, of course, we have the conversions, we have the ads, and we have new requirements that are coming up. And now, in fact, you need to be compliant in order to have more accurate data and to be aligned with all platforms.
Yeah, and that's something that is super important because I don't think a lot of people actually know that. And for a lot of people, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, they think that just by coming into Shopify, clicking the cookie consent that Shopify gives you, installing the Google app that Google gives you, or Shopify, because even between them, they don't even know who's responsible for that app. Facebook app, and they are not connected. They don't connect, and Google requires proper consent in order for them to give you tools like retargeting and others with consent B mode. Number two, but the fact that out of the box, neither the Shopify consent dialog nor the Google app supports each other, or actually makes it work. And we were talking earlier how you guys saw that wave come in, and you guys were ready way ahead of time, especially with consent V mode, which again, a lot of people probably don't know. Brand owners most probably don't know. This is a thing that probably will fall under the people running pay media, sometimes the agency, sometimes the in-house team, but they might even not even know. Like they think that anything that they did is working, but that handshake that is required between the consent given and and passing that information to the channels is super important.
Yes, it is. And of course, we are not talking only about a banner or compliance with Google. When we say that you need to be compliant with GDPR, we're talking about some other requirements that many people, many merchants are not aware of. For instance, you need to be very accurate with your cookie policy. It needs to present the proper cookies you're using, or you need to block all the third-party services that are tracking your users, and the user has to select through the banner which of them to allow to run, or even how you manage the customer data requests. So being compliant with GDPR, it's not just a banner, it's not just the Google Consent Mode version 2, it's other consent regulations, let's say, or frameworks for Microsoft, for instance. But you need the whole picture, you need to cover the whole picture of GDPR and some other variations of GDPR that are, uh, are special, let's say, for France or Germany or for United States with the don't sell capability. So yes, it's complex, but you need to be complete in all of these areas.
And not only that, I mean, you guys are also exposed to changes through the through the market engine itself, right? I mean, Shopify had a big change last year with the checkout extensibility, uh,
Yeah.
which automatically pretty much made everybody uncompliant because suddenly you know that specific place sandbox that Shopify added, unless you had an actual app like Pandectes, and this is how we end up finding you guys and actually moving everybody to you guys were ready right from day zero. You guys
Maybe we were the only app that we were ready for the checkout extensibility, and
yeah.
some months ago we also provided also we were the first that we provided the account extensibility option as well.
Yes, yes, that's true. Regarding the checkout
Yeah, and
accessibility, I think that we were already long before it was
Yes.
officially launched.
yeah, we were on another provider. And I'm fair to say, like almost as a public service message to people out there. We were on OneTrust, and we used to recommend to all of our brands OneTrust because at the time when we did the research, OneTrust was the most complete blocking solution that we could find. Their scan and everything, worked great. But when checkout extensibility came around, and again, this is the stuff that people don't know what they don't know. And a lot of brand owners just went, right, we need to, migrate to checkout extensibility because this app now requires it, or because Shopify said so, right? I mean, oftentimes people don't know what they don't know, right? Uh,
Yeah,
and when we started seeing that change, and because obviously we had to prepare ourselves for the checkout extensively, making sure that all the tracking, worked correctly, like we have our own technology that automates all of the tracking, the conversion part of it. And we started realizing that all of those implementations that were on OneTrust suddenly, that were um, compliant, suddenly were not compliant, and they were passing 100% of the data. And this calibration of the signal is super important because if you don't have tracking, or you have ups and downs, if you have double firing, or in this case, a lot of firing, and I don't know if companies like you guys or OneTrust actually you know understand the impact that any breakage on compliance actually have on performance marketing. Now, obviously, like you guys are there to provide a service, and that service is about privacy and is about compliance and is about making sure, like you said, that all the different frameworks are taken into account, that all the different legalities are covered. But when things break, and suddenly, you go from passing 80% of the data because there is an opt-out rate of 20% to suddenly passing 100% of the data. That has an effect on and the way the campaigns are being optimized and the way the channels optimized. When you cut that bit again, channels get crazy. And this is something that happened for us with OneTrust. And actually, our team worked with OneTrust. They had no clue that this was actually happening. And they actually worked with our team to build an app and launch it. And they were like, right, we have an app. Can you go and test it? I was like, we're not testing that. Because suddenly, like the whole setup, was moving towards that. And it really felt like an aftermath, as an afterthought, and we were like, this is critical, especially not because of just the compliance bit, which obviously is very important, but, from where we come from, which is performance marketing. And especially when you're driving hundreds of thousands and millions of pounds of paid media, and there is a glitch on on the signal going, super important. And yeah, that's when we found you guys, and we did a test with a couple of brands, and we thought this is how it should have been, and then we started moving everybody to Pandectes. But and it has been a great relationship ever since. But how do you guys choose, or how do you guys like, obviously you guys are Shopify only, which I guess that gives you guys an advantage to be early, but also adopt these changes that Shopify makes, but also making sure that things don't break, which I think, at least from where I see it, is super important.
Um, you know, we selected to be focused on Shopify because we knew that it has some different capabilities or different requirements from other platforms or going global. So it was better to focus there and follow all the changes from Shopify and provide updates and be up to date in order to make the merchant's life easier. And I think that this is a great differentiator from the other external tools that work across the globe. Because Shopify, as you already said, has specific front ends, it has a separate checkout, it has the pixels, it has an API that changes occasionally. It has new requirements from outside services like Google. So in order to group them all together, you need to be focused on this platform, and I think that it has a lot of traffic to focus there.
And of course, say that of course we want to be stable and not have code glitches ourselves. But bad thing for us is that a lot of things change in Shopify or in other channels like Google and the YouTube channel, which sometimes we are not aware. They were not communicated to us. So suddenly there is a change, for example, in the number of calls, for example, that Google YouTube channel makes on the consent mode. So there was a period right after March, I believe, last year that the Google plugin changed, and then they were having a bug and they were causing calls in the. This was not our responsibility. Okay, we tried to find workarounds. We were aware that it's not only the compliance thing that we have to offer to people, but also the stability about all these kind of performance apps. So it's very important for us to be stable on our thing. So there was a period last year that we were recommending that you should take out the Google and YouTube channel because it's issues in the consent mode until they finally came up with a fix, and then Shopify changed again the things. So it's a thing that works. And although our field is compliance, we greatly consider this aspect of things, the performance aspect of things, and the analytics in every we do or every change that we might make and break things. So, for example, right now we just launched a new version of our application, which is going to take the build for five badge. And if you were seeing the application yesterday, because we launched that yesterday and today, it's exactly the same. So we try to make things stable. Then we move one step at a time. We didn't decide. We have things that we're going to change in the Google Consent mode and give more capability, especially, for example, for geolocation things, different consent in different regions. But it's not something that we launch together with the new version of the app because we want to be very careful in the steps that we take.
Yeah, and I think that's super important. Again, something that we've seen with clients is communication is super important, especially when you can mitigate some of the impacts that some of these changes will have. Because ultimately and increasingly, many of these changes will have a drill down effect into performance, into your campaigns, into the way you're doing things. Now with the with AI coming into the play, even more so because there are decisions being made that oftentimes you're not in control of. But being able to uh, predict those changes, or at least be informed of those changes, being able to prepare yourself for those changes. Again, for many people, this is a black box, right? It's one of those things that people don't get to see or interact with or even think of. For us, it's super important. We have a dedicated team just for that because of how important and how impactful it is for good and bad, when things break or not, and making sure that that compliance bit, remains. Again, right? Like there are things like you were saying, Panos, earlier, that are not your responsibility, and suddenly you get impacted by a change by a channel or by Shopify or by other something that we've seen is applications in Shopify. They're very easy to install, but again, right, like they could break, right? I mean, some developer thought they were being clever by adding something that will either break tracking or will break compliance, and is making sure that you can capture those early on. And like you said, if you see any anomaly in the data that or events that are being captured, is being able to react fast and being able to solve those issues as quickly as possible to mitigate any sort of impact that then is going to be expensive to fix.
Yes, I guess this is kind of a knife that cuts both ways because there is one thing that is stability and not create problems to existing infrastructure. So you have set up your analytics way, and then it runs okay with Pandectes. But we know that we have to make some changes because we have to cover some other scenarios. Unfortunately, we cannot afford having multiple versions of the application being maintained at the same time. So our model of releases is that every time that we update, everybody updates. The banner that we publish in the stores, everybody gets the same version. And we have to make sure every time that we update things that all our customers are not impacted by this thing, or that they can safely migrate to the next version automatically without issues. This is something that's good and bad. It's good because it make the development easier because you have to maintain one version. But on the other side, there are times that we know that we have to roll out some things. For example, I'm telling you now about the consent mode that has to play with different regions. It's something that whether we want that or not, if somebody has set up in our application this geolocation filter and says that I want to run in the US and I don't want to run, for example, in Brazil or Japan, then consent mode is going to change. We're trying to do our best to communicate that to people because, when customers come to us, they never know exactly where the border is. They don't exactly understand whether this is a matter of performance and analytics or this is a matter of compliance. And we cannot blame them because we're not experts, right? So we have a lot of feedback about things like analytics and how they may be impacted. In the same time, we try to communicate what is the best solution and would be sometimes without, and we don't want to scare them because if you give them too much information, you know how this goes. If you give too much information, and it's not good.
Yeah, you
You're
have
gonna
to
scare
abstract some of
somebody.
that because
You have to
something that we've
abstract some of the
seen
things.
is, with some clients, they go, because we explain, right? And we have clients that come our way or prospective clients, and we go, right, you don't have a cookie consent at all, right? You don't have you're passing 100% of the data. And yes, there are things like, Google Consent B mode, so retargeting probably will not be there or things like that. But then we explain what happens, right? It's not just, there is the element of you need to give your customers consent powers, right? Of what and how they could track. In average, what we see is that between 17 and 20% of customers will opt out from cookies. That's at least what we see in we have certain clients where they have an opt-out rate of like less than 10%. That is the less so. Like the great majority sits between 15 and 20. Now that's 15 and 20% of data that will not be tracked, in a full
Yeah.
way. And there will be an impact, especially if you have campaigns that have been running for a while. Suddenly there's going to be a drop-off signal, of 20% going into that. There's going to be an impact on attribution, right? There is going to be a waterfall effect of what would that mean. Now, obviously, if you plan accordingly, right, especially for a brand that is going from no consent to consent, I mean, obviously that's a pretty big hit. But we have found brands who go, you know what? I don't want to touch it. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to put consent. I want to keep it as it is. Or let's put a consent banner, but let's not track it. Let's not
Yeah.
so you're kind of like making believe that you're, but it's mental. But equally, you don't know what you don't know, right? I mean, we just recently, have been testing this. So we have a piece of technology that we built for ourselves, what we're now making available, called Watcher. So what Watcher does is that it monitors the stores in kind of like quasi to real time. It makes sure that the sites remain compliant, that the cookie that the consents work, that the tracking actually works through different user journeys. So it makes sure that, tracking doesn't break, right? Now, why do we monitor this? Because again, right, like any breakage in your conversion is an impact on your campaigns. And if you're running hundreds of thousands of pounds or dollars or whatever in media spend, that will have a knockout effect. Now, we've been
we always
testing.
communicate that. Yeah, we always
Yeah,
communicate that.
and it let us know right away so we can, go and, fix it, because the first thing that we do is making sure that, we plug in Connect. Connect takes care of all that. There shouldn't be issues, but the client will install apps, will do things that might break it, right? So we're testing a new version that is, like it doesn't need intervention. It has some AI built in. So we've been testing it on thousands of brand stores just to see, like how it works, right? And it's mental, to see the amount of brands out there, big and small and very, very big, who will have cookie consents and cookie banners and spending probably lots of money on solutions like OneTrust, for example, that is pretty expensive. And yet it's just a make believe. It's just a banner without no connection to everything else. And, like you're still being exposed as anything else, but equally is how do you manage that and how do you calibrate? But the thing is, you're going to have to get there, sooner rather than later, right? But it's about understanding the impact and mitigating that impact, because ultimately, at the end of the day, a lot of that will convert, kind of like pun intended, into also potential revenue lost, right? Because you're not going to have as much data and whatever, right? And it's going to be a calibration before, there will be a dip before you start going up again. But it's about understanding
Yes.
that and managing that bit. So yeah, educating and how do you abstract that knowledge back to customers is super important, especially for them
Yeah,
is a bit of a black box.
it is. Of course, Pandectes, you are not a legal firm, so we cannot give advice. Okay.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, I think this is super important, right? I mean, both you and us, and we're not lawyers, like, and anything that we do is, and even for lawyers, it's like it's a difficult mind ground because, like you said, laws are keep changing, right? And so it's like for the most part, you need to approach it on a best with the best intentions possible, because again, and then make sure that you have the right partners around, right? Like you guys are do your side of the homework, having your own lawyers or centers of, like in our case, we use a company in Europe called DPO Center, which provides a lot of support around data compliance and actually making sure that you know we tick all the boxes, but also that we understand as much as possible, the subject, because ultimately at the end of the day, there is always going to be that tension between, performance marketing wanting more and more data, the channels wanting more and more data, Facebook wanting more and more data, Google wanting more and more data. Then you have elements like Apple intervening in there for business reasons that they make believe is for other reasons. And then you have the customer at the end of the day who has all the right in the world to say, please don't track me, right? And and I want to be in control of that. But it's keeping that tension healthy, but equally making sure that you're relying on the right type of person. And I think the most important thing is that this is not just a checkbox, otherwise there wouldn't be, thousands of brands, using Pandectes, or companies who choose solutions like OneTrust and others. For example, right, even multi-platform stuff, right? I mean, one of the reasons we end up choosing you guys for Shopify is because of how natively Shopify integrated you guys are. We have other providers for WordPress sites or WooCommerce sites that work great there. But also something that we've realized is that solutions that work great in WordPress not necessarily work great in Shopify, because they probably started on the other side, and haven't made their effort to comply fully on everything. And, in our case, we have a dedicated team that is always testing potential solutions. And especially when things break, we need to figure how to react quick to this. Again, because at the end of the day, the bit that worry of the most is consistency of data, quality of data going into the channels, so that our team can and our brands can optimize performance broadly. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to choose your partners wisely in terms of this, and understand that it's as much as of a black box we like to think of it. There are people like you guys, like us, like others out there who are doing their homework and making it simple. Like you said, like you want to make sure that you guys can provide compliance, full compliance out of the box, with as little as many clicks as possible.
Yeah.
But something to think, for people out there is that if it is too easy to seem right, there's probably something else that you will have to look behind, and it's about making sure that you strike the right balance in between the two. Guys, I really appreciate your time today. I mean, obviously, this is a very complex subject. Like I said before, I really appreciate you guys. You have a mighty team who's building a mighty super app that is enabling companies like us and brands out there to remain compliant, to remain consistent. Is there anything that, out of the experience that you guys have had, interacting with brands, interacting with agencies, that you kind of like want to close with, like any advice, any parting comments, of what you've seen, that you think it's important for people to take with them?
I think that you need to select a solution that is consistent. This is the first priority thing for someone, and then you need to keep an eye on your store for sure, because based on our experience, there are many merchants, they believe that whatever they have set up, it works, and of course it works. But after that, they're making several changes to the store, and believe that everything should work again as before. So as this compliance thing or the analytics part or the ads that are all together connected, and one may affect the other, I think that that is with these areas need to keep an eye sometimes to make a sort of the or it and see that everything is working fine. And that's what that you have a tool for that. You have a tool to make these checks on your end as well.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great parting comment. And also because just because things are compliant today, just because things are working today, doesn't mean that they're going to work in the next minute, because things are always changing. If there is anything, that we have learned is that, and, the stores don't remain stagnant. They're always adding new things. They're always bringing new things, new app, a new change that you do that can break it. And this is something that is super consistent. Again, we got to speaking to you guys and working with you guys because something broke that not even the provider knew about or knew how to fix, and we needed a quick solution in place to minimize any impact. So yeah, Panos, anything on your side?
We take this also, we take this also into account on the updates that we make, and we want to provide the technical features that even if you change something, for instance, you switch your theme, everything will work smoothly, and that you will not go back and set up. But of course, if you change other areas, for instance, you add more third-party tracking services, of course, you need to come back and see that everything is proper, that everything is blocked properly. So
Yeah, no, that
I
is
think
great.
that I think that you talk about partners who you maybe integrate with. Homework, we are doing our homework, so if we make a partnership, then we are able to help the final customer make better decisions, pick better products.
No, that is great. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And for everybody, this is the Live Collectivo. I really, I'm happy to have done this episode. I know you guys don't do much podcast, so I appreciate you guys agreeing to do this with us. And yeah, I hope you've learned a thing or two. The most important one is that compliance is not as simple as a checkbox on your Shopify store. It's much bigger than that, and it has an impact, especially if you're putting proper money behind it, behind your store, which we know a lot of the people who listen to this podcast do. So thank you, everybody. Looking forward
Thank
to the
you.
next episode, and until then,
thank you.
oh yeah, ciao.